Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, and apologies, we have been away for far too long. We'll talk a little bit about why in a second. Anyway, with me as always is your co-host, Patrick Minton. You can find him as NBA Geek on Twitter. Say hey, Patrick.
Hey, how's it going?
And as always, we are produced by our own voice of God, Brian Foster. You can find him on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Good evening, guys. I'm excited to be back and start talking about the NBA again. And, we've got a cat theme show tonight, it looks like. So shout out to that. I've got my NBA Cat Watch shirt on tonight. And Patrick is represented by, for our audio listeners, Wilt Chamberlain playing chess with two cats. So there we go.
All right, so we've got a lot to talk tonight. Man, I'm clearly off my game, Brian. Stuttered twice already. We'll see if I get back
The
on.
show must go on.
So we'll talk the NBA CBA, some talk about the Warriors and if they're better or worse than last year. We're going to talk how Chris Paul is underrated as the MVP, how people that use advanced stats are still idiots when it comes to Andrew Wiggins, and we may look at Patrick's portfolio, which is his annual trek to Vegas where he puts some bets down and see how that's going. But first, I'm going to be rude and start with some of my own topics. As mentioned, we've been off for a while. Pretty much that's me. I had my kid, my son Daniel, shared.
Hey, we had one while you were away.
You had one
I
before
think our shout out was to Daniel, right?
I think so, but, well, it's got to hear it in your words, though,
before
Dre.
he was born. I thought.
I'm just saying we were here while you were gone.
All right.
Not finish, but I mean,
All right. I'll look up the date to tell you if that is correct, Patrick. Anyway, oh no, that is incorrect, sir. So
what?
for the record, the show notes went out the day before he was born. It was the crunch time heading to the hospital. He did take a significantly long amount of time to get born. So anyway. But the editor, which is me, I've been off. I basically just took paternity leave. Didn't really ask or anything, but given the high salaries we pay everybody, I think Patrick is our highest paid at $0. Yeah, that wasn't a big deal. So anyway, my son Daniel now shares his birthday with Mario Ellie, who I think in a past post I pointed out how he's one of the unnamed Finals MVPs in NBA history. But I did have time to write two posts since I've been back. I wrote I really like these things, Patrick. You basically started it with the show, or not the show, the site when you were doing NBA Geek. I call them advanced analytics tropes, but we've done kind of the behavioral psychology thing of naming some stuff. You do that really well, so I did a few of those. And then, of course, we cannot go one show without talking Colin Kaepernick. So I'm going to bring up these two articles I talked first, Patrick, and then we'll go on to the rest of the NBA. I named three new tropes, I guess. I named one, you can't stop LeBron James, just talking about stars in the NBA. I talked Remember the Insanity. If you've listened to the show, you're familiar with it. I bring this up all the time, basically. Don't get excited about hot stretches in the NBA. 2 weeks of good play, a month of good play does not make a career. There are players that, right now you might think Joel Embiid is going to be an amazing star, and he might be. He's off to that.
Yeah.
I believe the Rookie of the Year is going to be on a minutes restriction. But don't go nuts. We haven't seen a full year. We haven't even seen 2 full years. Even your own Karl Anthony Towns, Patrick, is kind of simmered a little. So the Remember the Insanity. The thing I always bring is just cool it. But this is what I would like.
Towns never got hot. Before we talk about simmering, he never got to hot first.
Well, last season, so this he hasn't really come back to that. But I'm saying, after that hot. The beginning of last season, you're thinking age curve, everything else. You're thinking Karl Anthony Towns, oh my God, his sophomore year is going to be amazing, and not so far. Yeah, the Wolves, man. I blame you, Patrick. I don't know if we'll get to your portfolio, or at least your portfolio in depth, because usually the portfolio shows that can be an entire show in itself, entire hour.
Sure,
but you betting on the Wolves, you betting the over on the Wolves, I think cursed Karl Anthony Towns and Ricky Rubio to have a sophomore slump and have injury, respectively.
Yeah, probably.
All right, so the this last one is one I wanted to talk a little bit about. I called it the NBA League Pass Director. If you listen to the show, I kind of hate the eye test as a fight against statistics. And just for some of my background, I did actually computer vision in grad school, and that involved looking at the human vision system. And looking at the human vision system means you learn all of the flaws in the human vision system. Our memories are bad, our eyes aren't that great. And, we both love behavioral psychology on this site, Patrick. And, a lot of the behavioral sciences basically talk about this, how we just are not as good at doing the, cold calculating Spock thinking as we think we are. But the NBA Last Director, what I want to bring up that is always funny to me and no one ever talks about is when I watch a game on TV, I'm not watching a pure example of an NBA game. I'm not even watching it as if I'm at the game live. There is a cameraman that decides where the camera is angled. In many cases, you can't see all the players, all the coaches, all the refs. And so I get really bugged when people go, you got to watch the games. When my response, and I'd be curious if you have anything to chime in with Patrick on that, is if you watch the game like most people have to, which is film, you have to accept that you are watching a subpar product that still can't give you all the information.
Yeah, I mean, you're watching the broadcast of an NBA game is pure in some ways, but I mean, it's you're watching something that has been filtered and edited, right? I mean, it's like when you watch a reality TV show, you're not watching reality, you're watching somebody's version of that reality. And again, it's like you said, the camera is itself a kind of eye, and if the camera is focusing on one spot, you can't focus on another. And often there are 5 people or 10 players in the field of vision of the camera, but that doesn't really mean you have the angle to see all of the things that are important. Same if you have ringside seats, then you don't have the view from up top, the sort of bird's eye view that might give you other perspectives. So this idea that the eye can somehow tell us more than the data can is ridiculous. It tells us something different than what the data tells us. And it may be a good complement, a good supplement. And in the end of the day, that's never been my problem. Isn't with the people who are like watch the games, instead of reading your books. People, it's like there are 2 things that bother me. One is the suggestion that for some reason I don't watch the games. That apparently I lock myself in a room and I've never actually seen a basketball game, and I'm like just a blind man interpreting a painting or something. That's a ridiculous suggestion. And the other is that after you watch the games, if you don't have some time left over to read a fucking book, then maybe shut up about the whole advanced stats discussion, dude. There should be more things in your life than TV, and if you can't find time to do some reading after you're done with your couple of hours of TV per day, then maybe just butt out of the intellectual discussions.
I will say on, just the note of what you were saying of, not even saying you didn't watch the game. I always found that odd that people don't at least accept that it's really hard to ever accept that our vision is good. And I that's always been, like I said, I keep bringing up behavioral psychology. We love the book. I think Thinking Fast and Slow, it really goes over a lot of it. The Invisible Gorilla, which actually has a basketball experiment in it. I just really get incensed at people's overconfidence in how good their vision and memories are. And I think I do like pointing out on a regular basis, hey, this tool that you are putting so much stock in doesn't work as well as you think it does. And in fact, that's, for me, one of the common arguments against a lot of advanced stats. On-off statistics, plus-minus statistics have become really, really popular. And I see them all the time, and all I can say is, sample size, right? That tool will never be as good as you want it to be. And the fact that you are putting so much faith in it tells me more than your confidence in what you are taking away from the tool.
Yes. You said that really well. I don't really think I have anything to add.
Well, let's go to Kaepernick and see if we can keep ourselves talking the whole show. Although, we've talked a ton about this, so I don't think this will be a problem. But just another kind of pet peeve. Again, I'm stealing the start of the show to get a few of my pet peeves out before we talk the NBA. There was a general who has a silly name that I'm already forgetting. Brian, can you
Admiral Harry Harris, according to the article that we have open right now.
Harry Harris. And so what he did is for Pearl Harbor, where you're honoring fallen people, 75th anniversary, he comes up and says, these people at Pearl Harbor would not have kneeled at a football game. And to me, that was actually very offensive, because it's like, you're here to honor fallen veterans, and you are using that platform to take a dig at a football player you don't like,
Well,
which is. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
I'm sorry. I'm just. When the fuck did this become about the military? Right? I mean, his protest was about the police. His protest was about a. His protest was against the country because the country was supporting a system where the police
Let's be
have
clear. I
systemic
want that
racism.
present tense, Patrick. I mean, after Kaepernick, I really wish I could keep all the names straight in my head, but there was the New York trial, right? That went to a that the jury couldn't come to a consensus. There was one juror who said they weren't convinced. Where there was audio or not audio, video footage of a cop killing a person. All of the jurors said he was guilty, and he went free. So let's not even do past tense. It's present tense, right?
Right.
Kaepernick is
So the whole
protesting.
reason this got tied into the police is because most of the members of the police, um, or a huge majority of the members of the police, wished they were in the military. My impression of most police departments in the U.S. is that they're militarized to the fuck all, right? I mean, they're militarized like crazy, despite the fact that many of their members didn't actually serve in the military. And so they interpret any attack on themselves as perhaps an attack on the military, which is obviously ridiculous because, I mean, I don't know how about you feel about democracy, but I want to live in a country where the police and the military are completely separate branches because the military and the police serve entirely different functions. And if your military is your police, you probably live in a police state, and that's not a good place to live. There's a really great joke that people used to tell me all the time in Germany, and I'll repeat it here. Heaven is where the British are the police, the French are the cooks, and the Germans are the engineers. Hell is where the British are the cooks, the French are the engineers, and the German are the police. And if you just think about the history of those three nations, you understand why the joke makes sense and is funny, right? You don't really want your police and your military to be in any way similar at all. You want your police to be peacekeepers and protectors of the peace. You do not want your police to be military people. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I think one of the biggest problems in this country in the last like 20 to 50 years is this crazy militarization of the police. And that might be why everyone seems so quick to jump from Kaepernick protesting against America's police system to, oh, Kaepernick's protesting our veterans and what the fuck? You never said anything about your veterans or about your military. So go home and let the big boys talk now. The whole thing just pisses me off, right? He's not protesting the military. He's not protesting the police. He's not even protesting, the things that are in our Constitution and the things that the flag stands for. He's protesting the fact that our country has allowed a specific thing to happen that he thinks is incredibly unjust. And
just to follow up on that, to get my pet peeve out, because again, this is another one that's always, the league pass director thing has just been something in the back of my head that I felt like writing this last week. But, as soon as that guy said that, I said, World War II, right, was, 30s, 40s, late 30s, 40s. And I said, I would be shocked to find out if there were, I knew obviously Jackie Robinson, and I was going, what are the chances with the NFL in terms of how many black people were in it? And it turns out, lo and behold, that there were no black people in the NFL for the entirety of World War II. And right after the end of World War II, I forget his name. I feel bad about this too. As you can tell, I'm not great with names. There was a Heisman winner that was a black player that got into NFL, and there was just, all heck among the NFL owners about, the integration of that. So to me, what I get really annoyed with a lot of the spiels people put on about racism and stuff is they bring up the past, they invoke the past, and very clearly undermine the problems that the past has had. So that was the biggest thing that bugged me is this guy's trying to bring up Pearl Harbor as a gotcha to Kaepernick, and the response is there were no black players in the NFL, and if a black quarterback like Kaepernick were to try and get into the NFL, even if they were the best player in college, the NFL would have freaked out. So in this case, to your point, right, it's the same, just in sense, just like shut the hell up. If you want to have an argument about racism in the United States, you can't use a time in the United States history where the entire country was basically like, oh, cool, we separate people, we keep people out of leagues, that's fine, And I get really pissed off that people forget this, that people forget that, so many of the sports teams, sports leagues excluded players. Like, when did the Red Sox finally integrate, which is ridiculous? No one knows baseball. But anyway, just
I don't know baseball enough. I know because it was like all over the media that the last time the Cubs were in the World Series, they had no black players.
all right. So anyway,
So that was what, 1945, 48, yeah, 45, right? So they still weren't integrated then. Jackie Robinson what year was he?
he was 40s, right, or 30s?
He was, yeah, I think he was, but
Not 30s.
I don't know. I don't know very much about the history of baseball. I'm probably just embarrassing myself talking about this
It was
subject.
1947 for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So same point. The NFL and Major League Baseball did not have him. Anyway.
So, Dre, we have an answer to your question here. As Wikipedia's article about the baseball color line, there's a subheader calling the reluctance of the Boston Red Sox. I'll read briefly. The Red Sox were the last major league team to integrate, holding out until 1959. This is allegedly due to the steadfast resistance provided by team owner Tom Yawkey. So there you go, 1959.
Fantastic. So yeah, I wish, read to your point, Patrick, on the last one, you're like, if you have more time to just watch TV, read a book. Like, I wish more people would study history because we're going to keep Trump off for a little bit on this show. I'm just too depressed, especially with everything that's gone on in the 3 weeks since we've had a show. I wish more people had studied history, and Germany is one of the few countries that seems to be kind of equipped to this wave of angry white people right now because they actually tell their students to study that history.
Well, let's not go too far there. I think the far right is gaining a lot of ground in that country too. I mean,
blank sake. All right. So anyway, let's get to the CBA. This actually, I think it's on. I think you said close, Brian, and I think I even saw it on NBA.com where basically the two sides, the the Players Association and the NBA have come to a tentative agreement on the new CBA. So Carmelo Anthony kind of rattled something a few days ago where he said it would take a miracle for it to happen, but it looks like it's happened. We've kind of talked a little bit about this before. I'm trying to get the article up in front of me to read specifics.
Yeah, do you want me to read down some of the highlights of it?
Oh, let's go for it.
Yeah, so Wojnarowski, his headline was NBA and Players Association agree to a 7-year CBA, so maybe it is an announcement of an announcement, but he's saying it's a thing, and he's usually pretty accurate. Just some quick parts of it. We talked about some of this before, so I'll go through it real fast, and maybe you guys can react if you want. The deal could potentially deliver labor peace through the 23-24 season with a mutual opt-out available to be exercised in 22. Well, 7 years, there you go. Deal includes a great deal of status quo economically, including no change in the BRI split of 50-50 basketball-related income, that is. One thing that's interesting is a few weeks ago there were rumors that they may bring additional revenue sources into the BRI, which would be a way for the players to get more money, but then have the owners save face negotiating. So who knows if that actually happened or not, we'll see. There was an effort to incentivize players to re-sign with their own teams. Designated veteran star players will be able to sign 5-year extensions with the year left on their current deals. An initial year over the 4 years, which is currently allowed. My comment is that, are you mad, bro, about Durant, I guess, is how that came about. I'm not sure. Patrick, we talked about this before. The over 36 rule that prohibits players from signing a 5-year maximum contract if their 36th birthday falls during the life of the deal has changed, is now a 38 and under rule. So a little bit of change there. Not too big of a deal there, really, I think. Very much an edge case. They will keep the one and done rule for college players. More paternalism. They'll raise the rookie, veteran minimum, and mid-level exception salaries by 50%. That's kind of interesting. Those players are kind of paid more, except for the rookies, in comparison to the stars anyway, the max players. So we'll see what happens there. There will be two-way contracts between the NBA and NBA D-League, offering teams a chance to add 16th and 17th roster spots and pay players differently based on their assignments. So that's probably a concession to the players. And finally, the league will shorten its preseason and start the regular season a week sooner, another way to space out games. That was heavily rumored. So most of that we saw coming. Anything there, guys, that you really are interested in?
So quick question. Does this mean D-League players, it opens up the money for D-League players to make more money?
I would guess so, because I'm guessing even a reduced rookie scale NBA contract's probably bigger than a D-League contract, right?
So Well, no, let me rephrase. So I know like a year or two ago we were talking about the fact that the D League does not have an age restriction, or at least in the current
Mm.
CBA, meaning you can go directly from high school to the D League. You can't go directly from high school to the NBA, but you can go to the D League. So the theory, or the prevailing theory was, let's say D League players could make a few hundred grand instead of like 50 grand, or whatever their current max salary is, and you're, a player who's probably going to go in the top 10, some lottery player, but you're, out of, like if you were able to be drafted out of high school, and you're going to be a one and done player, you're going to be a lottery player. Is it better for you to just go right to the D League, and then get drafted after your 1 year in the D League?
Yeah, we'll have to see what that means for the rights, the team's rights over the players. We'll see. That's interesting.
Well, I don't think any team can have the rights to it because of the age restriction, right? I mean, by definition, if you got an age restriction, you can't have the rights to a player who's below that age.
So theoretically, someone could come out of high school, sign for whatever that reduced rookie contract is with any team they want, right? And then once they hit the age, then they could enter the draft and get a regular rookie contract.
No, I'm saying a player could leave high school, sign a D League contract with, like, say, the Rio Grande Vipers or whatever for 1 year, and then after his 1 year with them is up, enter for the NBA draft.
Okay.
And the question is if the money goes up. And I mean, it does look like they're trying to get more money into the D League with this, so we'll just have to see. I think,
Well, even from a purely, like, I mean, we talk about things like this in economics all the time. Like, is your college education worth it, right? Because your college education generally costs money, and then sometimes, much more importantly, it simply delays by 4 to 6 years, depending on how long you're in college. You're earning money, and as you know, if you pay attention in your finance class, the money you earn at the beginning of the year, assuming you can save it, is worth way more than the money you earn at the end of your career, right? If you can somehow earn 50 grand at age 19, and then the odds, assuming you have the same sort of pay scale as everyone else, then by the time you're 65, you're going to have a lot more money than somebody who didn't start earning 50 grand until they were like 23. And obviously with basketball players, the same types of things are involved, but honestly, wouldn't you rather just earn 50 grand playing for the D League than playing for the NCAA for free? Unless, of course, you truly value that education. But
well, even that, what ticks me off about that is players clearly don't do this. But the logic would be, if you had a choice of an NBA, even second, I think a second round draft pick makes around $500,000 a season, guaranteed for 2 years, I think, and then there some rights, that.
Well, I think in the current CBA, none of that. Like, there is no fixed. Like, a second round draft pick can negotiate a lot of things. The pay scale is fixed, but whether or not it's guaranteed is all very flexible, as opposed to the first round draft picks.
Gotcha. Okay, but so just basically, it would to your thing, it would make more sense to go in the NBA as a second round pick for one season, put that money in a interest bearing account, and go to college at your leisure. Because even if you thought of college, I think one of the Badgers, I referenced him in a post a while back, but I think he said his scholarship was worth like $250,000, and that's the sticker value. I argue that the sticker value is completely wrong. But yeah, so basically, would you rather have $500,000 in the bank earning interest, or an education worth $250,000? That's not a hard decision.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, Janet Yellen, the prime rate got raised to 3.75, I think, today. Anyway,
I did hear that. I haven't read anything up about. By the way, this show, Brian, just reading CBA contract deals and talking like interest rates, man, we got way more cerebral than I was.
You can have a million people yelling about the NBA on the internet. We're the only ones that look at the numbers, Dre. So there you go. Hey, I have one more thing on this, guys, that I missed the first time I read this article about the 36 and over rule being changed to a 38 and under rule. There's a key sentence here that Wojnarowski wrote. Several of the union's key executive committee, including President Chris Paul, Vice President LeBron James, and Executive Committee member Carmelo Anthony, could benefit financially from this rule. They're all in that age range.
They're the primary drivers.
I say good for them. Like they deserve it,
Although just to be fair, if we talk a little bit of politics, this is the interesting thing where you notice the people in power making the laws for
Yeah.
everybody basically focusing on themselves instead is an interest. But that's nothing new, right? That's why in every single league, the rookie scale deals are like the first thing on the cutting room floor. That's why I
Mhm.
think what's his name, Mike Trout was making so little,
Mm.
multiple MVP making peanuts. That's why Bryce Harper is arguing he's worth 400 million, and he's getting the I just forgot the name of the Washington team. That's embarrassing. But
The
they're
Senators, right? No, they're the Nationals now.
the Senator.
With the
Are they-
Nationals, okay,
wait,
sorry,
but aren't they
Wash.
paying him a gigantic contract now?
No, because that's what's happening is it's rookie scale, which is peanuts.
No,
And
no,
he's,
no. But I mean, isn't his rookie? Sorry, isn't his rookie contract up?
yes, and he's asking for a huge increase, and they're
I
basically
know, but I mean, haven't they already agreed though? Isn't it like 350 million or something?
well, I don't think he might be getting that contract, but I don't think it's going to be with Washington. I think they're looking at other teams because I think Washington is balking at it.
Okay, we have Bryce Harper's contract here on Spotrac, a great site for contracts. He's represented by Scott Boras, so he's probably going to do well. He is getting paid 2 years, 7.5 million currently.
But that's the one that's expired.
Yeah.
It's expiring, and he's looking to get a boost. And yeah, he made
Okay, so wait, his next two are in arbitration.
That's right. Arbitration 3 and 4. He'll be age 25 and 26. That's next year and the year after.
So he can't get the huge contract until he's 26.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Jeez. But anyway, yeah, but I mean that's the exact point. Is in all the leagues, baseball. I don't know hockey. I need to look up. This sounds like a dumb.
So hang on a second here. I'm sorry to derail again. So does this work like in MLB? Can the Nationals decide to forego arbitration and just give him a huge contract in order to prevent the scenario where he becomes a free agent after the 2 years of arbitration?
I believe so, but I think all the news has basically said that they're not going to.
Reported by Bob Nightingale on December 5th. So that's about 9 days before this show aired.
So his contract demands are for after arbitration.
The Nationals are taken aback by Bryce Harper's demands. They're set to move on after 2018.
So yeah, you're right, Patrick. He's got
Yeah.
2 more
This is
years
my
with them,
part.
and then he'll
I'm like the mayor here.
be hopping ship or something.
Yeah.
And then I think they might be doing the foolish thing, which we've seen in. I can't believe we're talking about Bryce Harper's contract instead of the NBA, but I think they're looking to do the stupid thing of trading a superstar before his contract expires because you want to get some value back, which always seems silly to me. All right, so sorry about that. Let's talk about the Warriors. You brought this up, Patrick, where you basically noted everybody's super, super, super excited about the Warriors. The Warriors are doing great. Kevin Durant still playing MVP level, I believe, but they're currently a worse team than last year. Is that right?
I mean, very slightly, right? And that obviously it kind of includes the first two
So-
or three games where they were struggling a little bit.
I looked into this, Patrick, because I saw your email and I, had to know everything there is to know about the Warriors. And Ian Levy actually wrote about this recently, and we've got his article right up here on Nylon Calculus. Check out. We talk about Ian Levy every week, it seems like. So yeah, check his stuff out. And so he's got a lot of charts and all that. But here's the bottom line. What he says is that their offense is among the best in league history, basically tied with this year's Raptors, which is kind of weird. But they have amazing offense, right? Their defense is significantly worse, though. So what about their point margin, which is, just for anyone tuning in for the first time, point margin and schedule-adjusted point margin or simple rating system, SRS, that's the best indication of how good they are. So they are just slightly worse than last year at point margin. Let's look at, here's we go, nice graph right here. So what does this all mean? Last year, they beat their Pythagorean expectation. That comes from Bill James. How much should you win based on your point margin? They exceeded that significantly last year. They just got really lucky, right? They had a lot of close wins. They had some blowout losses. So this year, they're actually right on their Pythagorean. So they're winning about as much as they should. So we'll see what happens. Will their defense improve? Will their offense come back down? They've been relatively healthy so far, although Pachulia has been hurt. So we'll see what happens with the Warriors. Although one interesting thing I found about them on Reddit today is that let's bring this up here. Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry are having career shooting lows from 3-point range. So maybe that'll come back up a little bit and help them out. But yeah, Durant's having career highs in all stats and is having an MVP caliber season, so they are pretty good. They're a little different from last year, but I'd say with Durant, I'd rather be in where they are now than where they were last year.
I will say one thing about Klay Thompson that's very interesting with getting Durant is we've said this forever. Klay Thompson is a role player, and that's not a dig, to be honest. He's an amazing shooter, and this season's right still no different. I mean, he's having a career low, but he's shooting 55.3% effective true shooting from the field. And let me see if I can get his true shooting. That's effective field goal. That's ignoring free throws, and with free throws, 58.2% true shooting. That kind of shooting puts, like, for comparison, Kobe Bryant's career averages to shame by like 3%. So he's a great shooter, and that's a role. And that team had a use for that role at one point. But as soon as they got Durant, basically the biggest problem with Klay Thompson is they're just, his role, there's nothing to do with him if that's all he does, and they don't really need him. Now, to be fair, he's taking like the same number of shots per game this season as last season, so that's good, I guess. But, candidly, they don't really need Klay Thompson. And what I'd also argue is his contract is kind of amazing on the current CBA because they paid him what he was worth on the last CBA. Now, I'm not saying worth in terms of we think he's a good player. I'm saying like fair market value. They paid him his market value, but they used the last CBA numbers. So he's still on that value in the new CBA that we just mentioned. They're set to agree to, and it's the reason they're agreeing to it is because revenues have boosted by $4 billion, which raises everything. I'd argue if I'm the Warriors, Brian, we've talked about this, never stand still. I think they need to trade Klay Thompson for like a defensive center. Rudy Gobert, Klay Thompson. That joke forever. Klay Thompson for Rudy Gobert is.
Don't tempt me like that. Rudy Gobert, so if we talk about MVPs and whatnot, he's having a ridiculous year. So I heard some like fake rumor on one of those clickbait sites, DeAndre Jordan for Klay Thompson.
Oh, jeez.
That would, oh my God. See, it's just not going to happen, but boy, I wish it would.
Yeah, because just for freaking stupid Warriors fans, just like Kevin Durant to that super team never happened.
Warriors fans would question that deal, which is what's sad. Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
Well, so the problem I see with this is that, I mean, Pachulia's already played pretty well.
He's
and
playing
so
great.
Draymond Green. And it's like, how are you going to find the minutes, right? And I agree with you. I mean, he's kind of the weak link in this whole team, Klay Thompson, for sure. But the ideal trade for him would just be for a better shooting guard. It's just that the kind that they need, if they made that trade, I think that the fans would go nuts. Because what they need is a 3-and-D guy. They need a guy who but see, everyone thinks Klay Thompson is the best 3-and-D guy, even though that's not really true because he's not really all that great at the D part, right? I think what they really need is a 3-and-D guy, but a 3-and-D guy who can, get some steals and get some rebounds and things like that, and help out in those ways that they need because they don't have that sort of rim protecting big man. I mean, the reality is so many of the other players on this team are so damn good that it just doesn't matter that Klay Thompson's not that good, right? You
That's
just
right.
Don't notice. Iguodala, Green, Durant, Curry, they're all just so good that it just doesn't really matter.
And I'll let us move to the next topic in a sec on that. But like the only thing I'm saying, Patrick, to that is we've talked this. I think another trope I might write about. I call it like the Spurs maintenance mode. Is this team you brought up what Zaza, Andre Iguodala. Those two guys are great, but Iguodala's in his 30s, Zaza's in his 30s, and kind of having outlier seasons the last 2 years. So the reason obviously it's again pipe dream, DeAndre Jordan or Gobert is that gets you that player in the future that's good for a couple of years. Something that's ridiculous about the Warriors currently is with Curry, Draymond, and Durant, that's one of the best cores at the youngest age. Like the only better core at a young age I can think of a team having is having Harden, Westbrook, and Durant. All of their
and Harden was in many ways a very similar player to Curry, right?
Who's that?
Harden and Curry were actually kind of similar players in terms of the role they played and what they did in the offense, right?
Oh yeah.
Harden had the ball in his hands a lot in that year that he played. Came off the bench for OKC. I mean, Sure, you could make the team a little bit better, but I mean, it's already a really good team. And they're kind of, there's, like I said, there's nights, like I said before the season, there are nights where they make really good teams look terrible. Like, didn't they blow out the Clippers by 30
Clippers,
or
they
something?
Yeah.
got most Spates to like get upset about it and try and talk the difference between the two
And the
teams.
Clippers are a good team, right? And they just blew them out of the gym, right?
And that, Patrick, I have to steal that as a perfect segue. So the Clippers being a good team,
Let's do it.
is baffling to us, just baffling to us. And we're going to talk maybe the state of advanced stats again, as we do every show. Chris Paul is the league MVP. Something I thought would be fun to do in past seasons, Patrick, when we finally get all the game-by-game numbers up on the site, is point out the fastest player in, like, team games. So that would be, like, adjusted to your team's 82-game schedule. So, by your team's 10th game, how many wins you have. And then look at the players to get to the fastest to 5 wins, to 10 wins, to 20 wins. Because not Curry, he's amazing too. Chris Paul this season was, I know for a fact, just looking at the numbers, Patrick, he has been the fast player to 5 wins. He's the only player at 7 wins currently, and I know he'll probably be at current rate the fastest player to 10 wins. He is just having an absurd season, and this is for Chris Paul, who we have in past pointed out has had some of the most absurd seasons for a point guard. And
Can I talk about some of these numbers real fast, Dre? Just
go for
so
it,
I've got
Brian.
them up on screen right here for our audio listeners. That's right. He's produced 7 wins, which is a full win over Gobert and Butler, who are at 6. No one else is at 6, so he's way above in total wins. He's at 10.3 points over par. No one else with a significant number of minutes is even 8 points over par, other than Gobert is at 8.1. He's rebounding like a small forward at 7.9 per 48. His assists per turnover is crazy. Let's go over his individual stats here. 14.6 versus 3.4. He's had years like that in the past, but those are like all-time great type years, right? Amazing. He's also has 3.8 steals, which is a career high, and he's had incredible stealing years in the past. And let's talk about that shooting. Oh, it's only 61% true shooting for a point guard. So here's my thing about this. People are saying Westbrook is Halsey's triple doubles. He's great. Like, Durant's been great. Harden's been great. All these guys have been great. But it's Chris Paul. It's not even close. Sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
I think the funnest stat I think in this line when you're looking at this is he's averaging more steals per game than fouls per game, which is incredibly hard to do. It's very similar to blocks. Like, to be that aggressive going after balls and yet not commit lots of fouls is incredibly hard. So to average more steals than fouls is just, it's truly amazing statistic, really.
Yeah, and I mean, one of a trick he has, and this is hit your Warriors too, and in past the Spurs, I think this is something that hits Kawhi Leonard a lot in terms of his appeal, is that the reason I don't think Chris Paul is getting the respect he deserves is because he's playing, I think, 31 minutes a game. So instead of averaging 20 points, like 22 points, 11 assists, and 2.5 steals a game, I think he's averaging like 19, 9, and 1.8 or something like that. That's off the top of my head. I'm not sure that's right, Brian. But it drives me nuts that people don't always get this thing of, if a player is great and that means they don't have to play 40 minutes a game, that can make them great even if their numbers aren't as great as, I kept using the word great, geez, as high as someone like, Westbrook's playing a ton of minutes, and it's because he's the only player on that team. I'm gonna keep cackling maliciously, and that basically you look at the Thunder, and the Thunder decided to give the money to Enes Kanter instead of James Harden, and Enes Kanter is a fine player.
I think it was Perkins, actually, Dre. Cantor came a little bit after.
If you look at what ended up happening in the scheme of things towards the end, they decided to extend Enes Kanter to a big deal. And that big deal was essentially the same deal
It's the wrong choice either way.
that they would have had to give to James Harden. So that's what's making me laugh, is they passed on James Harden and then years later said, what if we give that money to Enes Kanter instead?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, it's like what we said at the time. They traded away James Harden for future prospects, right? So they're basically saying we're trading away James Harden because we hope somewhere in 2-3 years we'll be able to sign a player who's better than James Harden is now. And that player turned out to be, I guess you could make an argument whether it's Steven Adams or Enes Kanter, right? That's what that dice roll worked out to be. And now in hindsight, we can look back and we say, yeah, well, it didn't work out. That player that you waited for, that player that you hoped would become a player that's better than James Harden, not better than James Harden, right? It just didn't. That clearly that dice roll didn't work out. And that's the thing is every time a team makes this trade, you can always say, well, that's probably not likely to work out because just the odds. You're giving away a James Harden, you're giving away a Kevin Love, you're giving away a whatever for future prospects. The odds that in 3 to 4 years, any of those prospects that you just acquired are going to be anywhere near as good as that guy you're giving away now, those odds are like fucking fantastically low because not many players ever come along each year in the NBA that are that good.
And Kevin Love is balling right now. He is playing really well.
Yeah, he's balling.
Yeah.
I have a quick thing, Dre. You mentioned Kawhi Leonard.
Segue, but you're going to break it, but I'll let you.
No, we'll go right back to it. So you mentioned Kawhi Leonard. Dave Barry, we tweeted a CBS article where they say he's a bad defender this year because his on-off statistics are bad. Give me a break with that small sample size. Good job taking them to task, Professor Barry.
Right. So, but here, I agree with that, but like, let's examine their logic, which I think is also really flawed, but where I'll try to sort of play devil's advocate and explain why their logic is also stupid. Their logic is what happens when Kawhi Leonard is on the floor is that whoever Kawhi Leonard is defending goes as far away as he can from the action and then lets the team play 4-on-4 against the other Spurs. And those other 4 Spurs are so bad at defense that it kind of works out. So Kawhi Leonard on the defensive end is neutralized by simply not being in the play because his man is like wherever. So my answer to this is, okay, interesting sort of leap of logic, but that's also bullshit because if every single game what you're basically saying is the other team's best scorer doesn't do anything just by virtue of saying, okay, Kawhi Leonard's going to guard you. So every single game, it's basically the equivalent of saying every single game, okay, whenever we defend, we'll play 4-on-4, and you have your best scorer sit out. That would be fucking amazing for every defense, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, clearly that's a better deal for the Spurs. And so I don't really quite understand how this logic ever made it to print.
By the way, one interesting piece just on the Spurs, and this is another theory for that on-off. On-off statistics, I'm sorry, are just too noisy for you to make as concrete of analysis as that. That's my problem. Is on-off statistics are fine, and you didn't do it, Patrick, but I'm just saying, like, when people make analysis like that and say Kawhi's worse on defense because of on-off, it's like there are a multitude of reasons, and if you don't dive into it. But something I'll say that I noticed this season is LaMarcus Aldridge is just not playing as well as he was last season. That could be age. That could be that Tim Duncan was keeping him in line. There are a multitude of reasons. Well, I'm willing to bet that LaMarcus Aldridge plays with Kawhi a heck of a lot. And so if a player that was playing with Kawhi last season that was really great at defense has dropped a step, maybe that does it. So I'm just throwing out another theory, and all I'll say is, yeah, that's the problem with on-off statistics, is that if you use it to make a very easy case for your theory, and I can make just as simple as a theory that you can't quickly disprove, that kind of shows a flaw in the statistics.
So that guy that Kevin Love got traded for, he must be really good, right?
That's a perfect segment, Brian, but way to go back to it. That's that guy that, waits 10 minutes after a point in the conversation to say, remember when you were talking about? But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
Speaking of Kevin Love.
Yeah, speaking of Kevin Love, who, by the way, oh my goodness, yeah, for the Cavaliers, is balling. And the Cavaliers without Kevin Love, LeBron James, and Kyrie Irving on the floor do not look like a good team. We're recording this show as they're losing to the Grizzlies and looking terrible. Not going to be a problem coming to the stuff. Andrew Wiggins is supposed to be one of these prospects now. Spectacular.
High school.
Barnes in the same boat. These look great out of high school, and they go and they don't look great in college. And it might hurt their luster a little, but it doesn't hurt them enough for people to forget about him. And he still goes number one, and he has not been good for 2 seasons. He did have a remember the Linsanity, right? Didn't he have a 2-week stretch last season, Patrick, where he looked like he was a good player?
He had even a week at the beginning of this season where he looked like a good player. He's continued to be pretty much a one-trick pony. he had a stretch this season where he was shooting over 50% from beyond the 3-point range and was starting to look like a two-trick pony, but that's kind of regressed to the mean, as we can all sort of expect. The problem with Wiggins has always been that he only does one thing, which is score, and he doesn't do it that well. If you look at all of his non-scoring numbers, they're all pretty subpar for the position he plays. For a small forward, he's a terrible rebounder. He doesn't pass the ball well. He turns the ball over a lot. He doesn't get blocks or
Since you
steals.
guys haven't been here
You
for
know,
a bit, if you go to boxscoregeeks.com, if you click on that tools tab on the top, if you don't have time for that, it's /players compare. You can go there and you can type in Andrew Wiggins and see exactly what we're talking about. We compare Andrew Wiggins to an average
he's
wing.
he's he's quite literally worse than an average wing in every non-scoring statistic, with the exception of personal fouls. And here's where I'll go back to where we were talking about. We were talking about Chris Paul a second ago. It's like, here's a scenario where I'd love to see him make like a half of a personal foul more per game. If that also meant he would get a half of a steal more per game, that would totally be worth it, right? But we don't see that happening. And this is one of those things where people keep talking about how he's young, but he's played over 6,000 minutes in the NBA. And I think one of those things that the research hasn't really addressed very well is when we talk about that age curve and that improvement, we talk about players hitting their peak at 25, 26. That was traditionally true, but was that true because of an age thing? Or was that true because 25, 26 seems to be when you hit about 7, 8, 9, 10,000 minutes, right? And so are we really looking at an area where, okay, he's got so much room to improve because he's only 21? Or are we saying, well, Jesus, he's played 6,000 minutes in the NBA and he still isn't really any better than when he came into the NBA. So why are we confident that he's going to be better?
Patrick, I know you commented on this back in the day, and I may or may not look it up for the show notes. But back at Wages of Wins, I did something like what you were talking about, which is I looked at players that after their rookie contracts turned into, I'll put it in quotes, stars, because the cutoff I used was like 10 wins. And so a player that disqualified was Stephen Marbury, who got 10 wins, but he didn't do it playing star level. He just got it because he played like, 30 over 3,000 minutes at a decent clip. But yeah, it is very rare for a player to get off their rookie contract and turn it on, after that rookie contract is up. So, I think to your point, even on Andrew Wiggins, even they're young, they're not going to be 26 or 5 seasons. It's like, yeah, but if he doesn't make it out of his rookie contract looking like he belongs in the NBA, you're just
Yeah,
kind of
and this would be different if we were talking about a scenario where he puts up these crazy numbers, but he also makes crazy mistakes that counteract it, and then you might like have some confidence that he'll figure out the mistakes and then become better. But that's not what Wiggins does. He doesn't put up any crazy. Again, we're ignoring scoring, so he'll score 40 every once in a while because he just shoots enough. But what I'm saying is he doesn't. It's not like he doesn't ever have any like, so it's not like we're talking about he has games where he does 15 rebounds and like 7 turnovers. It's just like he just never puts up strong off-ball numbers. Like he just never does. Like he doesn't he doesn't seem engaged in the defensive end in order to get the steals and the blocks and things like that. And he just he's a bad ball handler. I mean that's the source of many of his turnovers. Um, I just that's another thing. Like if he had high turnover rates, but he also had like really high assist rates, then that could be another thing. But he doesn't have any of those things. He just
kind of like
doesn't show. He hasn't shown me anything other than athleticism, pure athleticism. He hasn't shown me anything at all. And the for every amazing athletic guy who became a superstar, you can also point to a guy like Gerald Green or Anthony Randolph or some other player who had crazy athleticism and didn't become a star. And so I really respect Jim Peterson, the color commentator for the Wolves, but I've never understood why he's so high on Anthony Wiggins. I understand that the athleticism he sees, and I understand some of the scoring ability, but Jesus.
Well, he's employed by the team. That might be one reason why.
Well, no, I mean he's generally
Oh, okay, that's fair.
truth to power, right?
That's fair.
He's definitely one of the smartest color commentary guys in the league, and probably the one who's like the least a homer of everybody. I mean, he's obviously not going to go out there and talk about how Andrew Wiggins sucks or anything, but his extremely like hopeful and high expectations. I don't see it, right? To me, I think Wiggins' ceiling is like Rudy Gay, unless he shows me something entirely different. And
And I
it's
mean,
just kind of hard to
certainly
see.
there are players, there's the Steve Nashes, there's the Zach Randolphs. There are players that have done it, but like that's the problem. It's as soon as you have to start going, well, of the 4,000 plus players that have played in the NBA, I can think of three guys that did this, then that's when you kind of go, maybe
Yeah.
look for another player.
And I think that's like I'm already pessimistic enough about this is by the way, this season I think is the earliest I've ever just turned it off in terms of being a Timberwolves fan. Like even when they traded away Kevin Love, I watched him for a while just out of curiosity. But I haven't watched a game since game like 7 because I'm just like, wow, this is so incredibly disappointing. I don't want to see this shit anymore. And I mean, it didn't help that they lost every third quarter by 20 points. To just like talk about popping a balloon. And talking to other people in Minnesota, the feeling is very much like that. Like this is a season when they should have been super excited about like even an incremental leap forward, and the fan base is already like, "Fuck off, go. We don't want to see you." And it's like, um, you think that's bad now? Wait a year and a half when Andrew Wiggins signs a $150 million contract. Then it's really going to get bad.
So I actually listened to the segment from the 538 podcast where they talk about Wiggins, and so the reason why I was interested in this because it was a little bit clickbaity, right? And they said they discuss why the Timberwolves star is puzzlingly poor in advanced metrics, and my first thought is puzzlingly he just sucks, right? But to be fair, once they get into it, they do pretty much say he sucks. Now, they kind of go about it the wrong way. They use RPM and all these stats we hate, but they basically say, well, yeah, he's an average shooter. He sucks at defense and everything else. So he's just really not that good. Here's another and they kind of go about it the wrong way. Another thing they get wrong is they ask if he's a bust or not. And let's be clear, there's one or two star players per draft, right? So it's hard to call him a bust.
I think you looked it over, right, Patrick? There's an article I won't have in the show notes, but that you looked over and basically counted about 2 players a draft that were star level.
So the point is he's just overrated, and giving him all these, shots and minutes is the only sad part of it. He's not really, doing anything you shouldn't expect him to be doing. So anyway, they got to the right place, but they kind of stumbled their way there. So anyway, check out that podcast if you want. I don't hate 538 as much as Dre, I guess, but it was interesting.
I just said this a lot. It's just an example of at least their basketball analysis.
We all agree on that.
It's using the numbers the wrong way, and at this point, it's just painful. There's nothing to really do. I look at Twitter. I look at a lot of mainstream articles, not anywhere near as frequently as I used to. Brian, you're kind of the source of it. You send me the script every week, and I'm like, Dre, look at the source of mainstream analytics, and I look and I go, I'm glad I didn't spend my own time looking that up. It's just done the wrong way, and maybe it'll change. Maybe it'll get fixed, and it gets lonely because you turn into the get off my lawn guy. And
that's what we're here for.
Everybody's playing on the lawn, and if you're the get off my lawn guy, you turn pretty unpopular. So anyway, that's been our show. I tried to give myself a hard deadline of 9:30. Brian, we almost made it, only a little over, and that's with a few topics I thought we would easily get us crumbling on. We will definitely be back next week. I do actually have a shout out that's kind of pertinent to one of our first topics, Patrick. But do you have any shout outs to give?
I have a shout out to give, and that is to a NCAA Division II player by the name of Stephen Davis, who plays for Wright State, the Wright State Raiders. I posted a link in our group chat here, and maybe Brian can call that up for the window. Basically, he threw down the most vicious dunk I've ever seen in any game. He comes into the lane, and he collides with the guy, and it's almost like when he collides with the guy, like some turbo boosters in his shoes turn on, and he jumps like another foot in the air after colliding with the guy and then jams it home. It's just a ridiculous dunk. And I know it's, D2 ball somewhere with a D2 team playing against a team that probably belongs in D3, but holy cow. It's definitely a highlight worth checking out.
Oh, you.
Oh, it does. It's like that
NBA Jam, definitely.
NBA Jam where it's like, oh, when you hit the player, then you go upwards.
I'd say it's more like Metroid where you have a double jump. Like you jump again once you're already in the air. Or he even jumps off the other player.
Double there, like he collides with the guy and he's like, oh, let me hit the boosters here.
That's a hell of a dunk.
Jeez.
It's kind of ridiculous, right?
Oh, that's a good shout out. All right, so my shout out is to a stand-up comedian known as Steve Hofstetter. His name is Steve Hofstetter. Just follow him on Twitter at Steve Hofstetter. He's really well known for dealing with hecklers and then putting videos of it up on YouTube. He had a one that went viral a while back about sexism, and we saw how that worked out. Good job on electing Trump, United States. I'm going to be bitter for a while. He actually had one where a cop heckled him, and he has a bit about bad police, and he's totally fine if you want to respect police officers, but if you are if you're defending the police that shoot people, maybe the only reason you should be offended by people getting mad at that is if you yourself are a bad cop. So I think I probably ruined his bit, which is a lot funnier than what I did, but you should definitely check that out. He's also just a good follow on Twitter, and I've seen him live. He's an awesome comic. So Steve Hofstetter, we'll include the link. I think Brian's shown a little bit of it, although since it's a stand-up comedy thing and I'm talking, obviously it's not as exciting as that dunk bit is just.
Oh, I'm sure you're funnier than him.
Oh, dear God, no. In fact, that's one of his common refrains is, if you get in an argument with him, he goes, he's paid to be clever for a living. So, when you talk to stand-up comedians and you think you're going to beat them in a debate, that's, obviously folly unless they're a bad stand-up comedian, which Steve Hofstetter is not. Anyway, any shout-outs from you, Brian?
Oh, just to you, Dre, and your family. Congratulations on the addition. That's it.
You.
And also, shout out to all cops. Please don't arrest me. I love cops. Thank you, cops. I love you.
Close to Oakland. That's a fair thing to say, Brian. All right. Anyway, that has been our show. If you found us not through the site, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. If you want to catch the show, we are on Stitcher, iTunes, the Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. We go live every week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except when I'm having kids, at twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. And if you missed the live show, you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. You can follow myself, Nerd Numbers on Twitter, Patrick Minton, NBA Geek, and Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian. All great follows on Twitter to know when the show's going on and other stuff. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.